Okay, it's time for part 2 of my close encounter with the actual flat earthers in Frankfurt, Germany. Their banner. Move out of the way, Mr. Freiberg. You're not up until part 3. Now, because it's going to take a minute to do this, let's eliminate some of the fluff from their banner. These are photos which are not accompanied by any data or source or calculations, so they're basically worthless. This is a quote by someone defining cognitive dissonance, and this is an ad for an app which is disproven during the warmer months in the southern hemisphere, half of the moon's cycle every month, a compass, solar eclipses, lunar eclipses, moon phases, solar and lunar perceived rotations, solar and lunar tracking, both equinoxes, and even middle school geometry. And it is even based on a sun and moon clock which was made by Rob Skiba, who used stellarium with a super wide field of view with the Earth's surface removed, viewing from the South Pole.
So I'm using Stellarium. It's heliocentric globe-based software now, created by people who believe in the ball. And I was modeling it, and it allows you to figure out, what direction you want to point the camera, what type of camera you want to use, and whatnot. And you could set your location. So I set my location to Antarctica in, I think it was the Ross Ice Shelf area. And I set the duration up for an entire year. I wanted to see the whole year. And the software also allows you to turn off the stars and turn off the ground plane. And I got this idea, instead of just looking in one of the cardinal directions, north, south, east, or west, I decided to angle the camera so it was looking straight up. And the software actually allows you to, as if you're pulling the camera into the ground, and put it in sort of like a fisheye lens mode where you can actually see all 4 cardinal points at the same time. Well, I thought, man, I wonder what that would look like over the flat Earth map. And so I punched out the black in my video software and put in the image of the azimuthal equidistant map. And then the only thing I did to that video was do a horizontal flip, because it was going counterclockwise from the ground view looking up. And since I'm now looking down from above, it needed to switch from going counterclockwise to going clockwise. That's all I did.
And for those of you who are wondering, no, I am never going to get tired of playing that clip. Cool? So let's get on with the claims. And get comfortable, this is going to take a minute. Let's start with this statement. If an idea is not observable, measurable, repeatable, falsifiable, then it is not considered scientific. Observation is the active acquisition of information from a primary source. Measurements are the acquisition of lengths, weights, intensities, or other actual statistical data about an object, relationship, or an effect. Repeatability means performing an experiment using identical conditions or calculations and arriving at identical results. Falsifiable means the ability to disprove or substantiate a counter-hypothesis with other observable, measurable, and repeatable experimentation more fitting to the observation or measurement. Since there is no observable, measurable, or repeatable experimentation concluding only flat Earth, which cannot be disproven with simple experimentation or calculations, thanks for stopping by.
Oh my god!
Okay, we'll keep going. Below this flat Earth destroying comment is a write-up outlining Newton's laws of gravitation, but then points out one of the issues that was found with Mercury's orbit versus Newton's laws, but fails to mention that in those same laws, which are still used today, had even predicted the existence and position of Neptune before it was actually discovered due to the irregularities in the orbits of Uranus. But since flat earthers dispute even the existence of other planets, or space at all, it's hysterical that they would even mention this. So we'll just go ahead and cross that one off. Next, we'll move to this. The Cavendish experiment, which flat earthers claim has not been observed, measured, or repeated. Yes, it has. I did it, Furball did it, this young lady did it, it's been done in several science classes. Hell, you can even buy a kit online to do it yourself. So, that's bullshit. Next to that, there is this pathetic claim, echoed over and over and over again. Their claim, quote, gravity needs to be strong enough to hold vast oceans to a 1,000 mile per hour spinning ball, yet weak enough for birds to fly. Strong enough to hold people, cars, and buildings from floating off into space, yet weak enough for butterflies to even evade its pull. First, the Earth does not rotate at 1,000 miles per hour. That is an attempt to make you think of this, making the rotation of the Earth seem completely absurd. That is not how you measure rotational speed. The Earth rotates at 15 degrees per hour. This is half the speed of the hour hand on your clock. Its linear velocity is up to 1,000 miles per hour, but that depends on your latitude. For example, at the equator, your linear velocity is approximately 1,000 miles per hour. But if you went to Anchorage, Alaska, your linear velocity is only about 520 miles per hour. And if you stood 1 mile from the North or South Pole, your linear velocity is about 1/4 mile per hour. Y'all really need to get that right. Now, as far as gravity versus the oceans, birds, and insects, here's a simple explanation for you. So, since nobody else is going to do it, Uncle Sly is going to have a talk with flat earthers about the birds and the bees. Flat earthers claim that gravity needs to be so strong to hold down the massive oceans, but birds and bees can counter gravity with ease. It's also number 32 in the Book of Dubay. First, you have to understand the three objects that we're dealing with. We'll use a hummingbird, which between its largest and smallest size is an average of about 12 grams. A honeybee, which is only about 100 milligrams, and the water molecule. But in grams, well, I'm not going to say exactly what the weight is, but let's just say there's a whole lot of zeros behind the decimal point. Flat earthers commonly want you to believe that the bigger something is, the more gravitational force is required to hold it down. The joke is that's simply just not true. The more dense something is, yes, I said dense, the more molecules it has for gravity to pull down on. This cumulative pull is measured as something's weight. And since gravity pulls towards the center of the Earth, or the center of a mass, this is why something moving towards the center of the Earth appears to weigh less. So what does this all mean? Well, that's quite simple. Birds and bees have to work quite hard to generate enough friction against the air to lift themselves against the force of gravity. Why? Because of the fact that they are actually a mass of molecules grouped together and connected. Water, by comparison, is not. Water is a collection of free-moving molecules, each molecule being independent of each other. Basically, water is nothing more than a condensed gas, not a single mass. Similar to a swarm of bees, you can have 100 bees, all moving together, but they do not create a single heavier mass. What is the relevance to gravity? Simple. An ocean is not a thing. A body of water is not a thing. So in itself, an ocean does not have a combined weight, which gravity has to be strong enough to hold down compared to birds and bees. Ironically, if your argument was actually placed backwards, it would actually make more sense, but would still be explained in the same way. So basically, the birds and the bees are heavier than the oceans, as far as gravity is concerned. Y'all have a nice day. And since they only want to acknowledge the existence of density and buoyancy, take a look at these requirements for that claim. So let's look at gravity again. The majority of flat earthers believe that the force of gravity does not exist. Most don't know why, but they just believe that it doesn't exist. And basically they just pass it off as density and buoyancy, making things fall down. Did you know that if density alone were responsible for an object's weight, then the weightless experience on the zero-G aircraft, previously known as the Vomit Comet, would not occur the way it does? Let me hit this a little closer. If density alone were somehow responsible for weight, absent any force, then only certain objects would be weightless at certain times, or more specifically, falling at certain speeds. We all know how the zero-G aircraft works. It flies in a parabola, and as it's going down, everything inside of it is basically in a state of free fall. So if the zero-G aircraft dove at one speed, then light enough objects like water would float, but the people would still be on the floor. If it dove faster, so the water would rush to the roof, and then lighter people would begin to float. And then if it dove even faster, the poor light people would get squished up against the roof, just like the water, and then the heavier folks could have a turn. This would be the observation that you have on the zero-G aircraft if gravity didn't exist. If any of this sounds absurd to you, well, that would be the observations of your claim. Let's try some comparisons. This is an aesthetically pleasing dark-haired female human of presumably Asian descent.
Oh my god.
Gravity wins. Fight.
Oh my god.
Gravity wins. Fatality. Fight.
Oh my god.
Gravity wins. Flawless victory.
The reason why everything floats at the same time is because gravity does exist, and it moves at a measured and known speed, more commonly referred to as gravitational acceleration, in most equations as little g. Gravity exists. It's measurable, it's calculable. Y'all have an idea.
Oh my god.
Now prepare yourself for the stupidest gravity slide on this whole banner. Words can barely explain how incorrect and downright ignorant this slide is. I'm going to give this one to you in small pieces to avoid mental injury. First, 71% of the Earth is water. No. 71% of the Earth is not water. 71% of the Earth's surface has water on it, and its depth is almost insignificant compared to the mass of the Earth. As a matter of fact, if you drew a circle on a piece of paper representing a cross-section of the planet, the distance in elevation between the highest point above sea level and the deepest known place in the ocean would be contained in the line that you drew. To scale, the condensation on the exterior of a cold soda can is deeper than the ocean. And you gotta love this diagram. Given the vertical sides on each example, this would have to mean that the illustrator is depicting a very short distance, as the lines on the sides are parallel. Let me correctly modify the ones that you are claiming as wrong for a more proper display. For a proper illustration, the edges of a spherical Earth example would be perpendicular to sea level, like this. Ah, that's better. Then there's this doozy. Quote, "The absurdity of the globe is believing that water's surface takes the shape of what is underneath. Nobody has ever said that the surface of liquid water takes the form of what is underneath it. Ever. Otherwise, there would be no such thing as the deep end of a pool. And apparently, hidden in the word believe is lie. Gonna have to remember that. Now, get ready. This is why I love this slide so much. Even after correcting the punctuation, this one actually hurts to read. And don't forget, big name flat earthers paid hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for the dissemination of this information. Quote, "Even if the oceans were forced to stick to the ball Earth because of gravity," forgiving the period as a comma and the fact that nobody has ever said that water sticks to the surface of the Earth, picture their concession here. Water on the surface of a ball. Visualize that, because here's where it hurts. Quote, "The water would still remain level, not curved." So this can only mean that flat Earth comprehension concludes that this is the globe model of water, because the flat earthers Level only means flat. Now it's time to move on to their proof of their model. And let's get this part out of the way first. According to this group of flat earthers, the North Pole is in Mongolia? And since when are there 3 souths? According to these guys, there are 2 souths in Antarctica and 1 off the coast of Chile. Do folks in India not have a south? Or an east? Or a west? And check this claim out. Wait, I think you spell belief like this. Quote, surprisingly, the flat earth belief is backed by solid science and undeniable visual evidence. Really? Where is it? Seems to me you could have covered this entire banner with that. And since you asked, so how does it all work? Here are just 10 things off the top of my head of why this doesn't work. The sun and moon rise and set positions do not match their stated tracks above the flat earth. The angular size of the sun and moon would have to change throughout the day if circling above the flat earth. The sun and moon would appear to speed up the first half of their traverse and slow down the other half if circling above the flat earth. An observer in the southern hemisphere would never see the sun or moon rise south of east nor set south of west if circling above flat earth. An observer in Miami, Florida would never see the sun below 14 degrees above the horizon, period, and never below 10 degrees in Melbourne, Australia. Flat earthers claim that the sun and moon do not rise or set, but rather disappear due to the distance, but seem to forget the more distant stars don't disappear and they are further away. The distance and sizes of land masses shown on the azimuthal equidistant map are grossly inconsistent with the actual known and traveled land masses we all live on. The distribution of sunlight across the azimuthal equidistant map is not even in compliance with the most basic laws of physics, and would not account for the observed day and night times any day of the year south of the equator. Flat Earth does not work with compasses, Flat Earth does not work with celestial navigation, Flat Earth does not work with flight routes, Flat Earth does not work with tides, Flat Earth does not work with star trails, Flat Earth does not work with eclipses, moon phases, long-range observations, short-range observations. Okay, so that was a few more than 10. But you get my point. Oh, and this is just a scratch. So no, Flat Earth is not backed by any science or observation. Got it? Now on to this little bundle of crap, which I equate to be the visual representation of a troll in my comment sections. So let's knock this out. First, the reason why the moon's umbra is smaller than the moon is because of the fact that the sun is vastly larger than the moon. Additionally, the sun is not a single point of light, but rather a light-emitting body. That is the only way that you can get this effect. Period. If the sun and the moon were the same size and in close proximity to each other, as flat earthers like to state, and an eclipse occurred, the area affected by the umbra and the penumbra would be enormous. Not to mention, there are plenty of flat earthers out there who deny the very existence of umbra and penumbra. Why would you put a period after an acronym? And don't forget about all those wonderful photographs we have of flat Earth. And I love this one. Not realizing the use of two different fields of view and claiming it to be some kind of a conspiracy is side-splitting flat earth humor at its best. Here, look. I'm filming a globe with two different cameras. One has a wide-angle lens, one has a standard lens. Same globe, just looks different. Got it? So let's go ahead and do this. A video about photographs, composites, and CGIs. This video is about the differences between computer-generated images, or CGI, composite images, and actual photographs. And since flat earthers seem to lack the ability to read, I'm going to go ahead and walk you through this. First, we'll concentrate on the photographs, because it's the simplest thing to cover. Here's the definition of a photograph: a picture made using a camera in which an image is focused on the light-sensitive material and then made visible and permanent by chemical treatment or stored digitally, meaning pointing a camera at something and taking a photograph of it. Pretty simple. This is a composite image of an intersection in downtown Leipzig. Some would call it a panorama, and others would just call it a picture. The reason why it's called a composite image is because it is comprised of several strips of images compiled together to create a single composite. And of course, the purpose of this is to create a single view of an area which might not otherwise be possible using the lens or the position of the camera. Since the smartphone I used to take this shot does not have a wide-angle lens on it, my camera takes several shots to accomplish my desired result. Another noticeable trait of composites is if there are moving objects during the time of the composite shooting, they will either appear chopped up or even doubled depending on the time between the individual shots, while the static objects remain in their current and correct locations. If you wanted to create a composite of the entire surface of an object, you would take photos of its surface from several different angles, in this case, a low-orbiting satellite, then place it onto a virtual model so you can use all of those images as a whole, while the model still retains being a grouping of actual photographs, and then you can position it any way you need it. Computer-generated imagery is primarily images or objects which are 100% created from computer-generated art and models. First, you start with a virtual object, comprised of virtual three-dimensional coordinates, more commonly called a mesh. Then you can also add lighting. Then you attach an image or a virtual material to the surface of that mesh to give it the desired appearance. Then you can define its reflections and textures, and you can also add layers to it, like in this case, clouds and an atmosphere. And since you're working with a virtual model, or a composite on a virtual object, you can adjust the model or camera properties to get your desired view. Like here, dollying the camera closer to the object, while simultaneously expanding the field of view. And now I'm going to address this ignorant slide. This slide shows up in several Flat Earth videos, as well as being used as answers to posts and comment threads. I'm going to tell you what NASA says about all 8 of these images. And I think you'll find something very interesting about this slide, which I will explain at the end of the image descriptions. In the first version of this video, I actually read off the entire captions below each image as posted by NASA. But that made the video about 25 minutes long. So I'm just going to give you the summary of each one. You can hit pause on each one and read it yourself, or click the links in the description below to each and every one of them. Okay? Let's go. The first image, which is claimed as being taken in 1975, is actually stated to be taken in 1972 by Apollo 16 with a Hasselblad camera. This is a photo not a composite, and not CGI. This is slide number 2, taken in 2015. This is also a photo. This is also a single shot, comprised of 3 different colored shots, but still a single shot, taken from the Discover satellite. This is not a composite, and this is not CGI. Image 3 from 2007. This is a multi-layered composite. The Earth in it is from the Blue Marble Project. The clouds in it are from the GOES satellite, basically superimposed on top of each other to end with this image. This is a composite, not claiming to be a single shot photo. Okay? So the next one. Image 4. It's slated as being 1997, but it's actually a kind of array of different times. It is also a composite from the U.S. Geological Survey, NOAA, Blue Marble Project, and the GOES satellite, similar to the one we just saw. Now, the only reason why this was classified as a photo from 1997 is because of the NOAA data from September 9th, 1997 about the hurricane and the cloud coverage. Now, I know a lot of folks want to say something about the moon being added to this image, but since flat earthers don't know anything about scale or perspective, like this guy.
Okay, so there's the moon in this shot, really close to the Earth, but the moon's not really that close to the Earth. The distance is supposed to be 239,000 miles away, but our eye altitude from the surface of the Earth is only showing 9,154 miles away from the surface of the Earth. But the moon is supposedly a lot closer than that, according to what we're seeing here from this this official NASA photography here. So that's not really matching up.
Who was actually debunked by this guy a long time ago.
Now, Satellite Rob is over 1 million miles away. And what do you know? We've come up with pretty much the same exact results that NASA had.
I won't go into the lack of research that flat earthers do. It basically makes no sense to discuss this with a flat earther. Image 5 from 2007. Now, saying 2007 on this one is a little bit pushing it. It was released in 2007, completed in 2007, but the images and the composites of Blue Marble and MODIS images span from 1994 all the way up till 2004. This is a composite, not claiming to be a single shot photo, and it's not CGI. Image 6. This is also a composite of Veer's images, taken from aboard the Suomi NPP satellite. But I got the year right on this one. This is a composite. It's not claiming to be a single shot photo, and it's not CGI. Image 7. Boy, y'all love this one. This is a composite of imagery, again from the Suomi NPP, taken around 2012. And as I showed you a little earlier, since it is a composite, which is put onto a virtual model, the reason why the United States looks a bit out of whack in this is because the camera is close to the virtual model, but with a wide field of view. Nothing tricky, nothing weird, that's just how you make this. So again, this is a composite, it is not claiming to be a single shot photo, and it's not CGI. And image 8. Everybody knows this image, it's from 2002. This image is from the Blue Marble Project, which is a composite of satellite images. Nobody ever claimed it to be an actual photo, and it's not CGI. All good? All right. So in short, the person who made the 8-image slide knows that his claims are wrong because he had to research the actual pictures to get the dates of them. He knows that 6 out of 8 of them are composites and only 2 of them are actual single-frame photos. This comparison of the sun to other stars should win an award for the incompetence that it displays. Showing images of stars out of focus only displays a lack of ability to use the camera. Something else I demonstrated years ago. Flat earthers were right. Look at this zoomed in image of a star, and look, it's changing colors, and it doesn't look like a star, and there's a oh my bad, it's just a beacon light, and neighboring city. Oh, sometimes it's just that easy. Focus, people. Focus. This one is also great. Using satellite thermal imagery next to a bigger slide which claims that satellites don't even exist. Wow. Not to mention that this image that they used seems to be obviously cut in half, using the extremes of two halves of the year, and not a single temperature reading at any given time, displaying more of an average throughout the year, when in reality, the temperature fluctuates due to the tilt of the Earth facing the Sun. And a density tower is also not helping your whole no gravity argument, because the very formula used to define buoyancy requires gravity, unless you want to claim that either density or buoyancy alone choose their direction of influence. This little flight route map is flat earthers not understanding that just because two airports exist does not mean that there's a direct flight between them. But there are plenty of southern hemisphere routes that they, of course, didn't show in this diagram. Speaking of flight routes, the flat earthers that I met at this presentation tried to tell me that this is a map of flat earth flight routes. But of course, they didn't do the research to notice that these are actually labeled with their distances and flight times, which do not correspond to the flat earth claim. And to be honest, flat earthers can't even get the airplanes themselves correct. This slide actually claims that if an airplane did not fly in accordance with the curvature of the Earth, it would, quote, fly straight off into outer space, which is ignorant of how airplanes function in the first place. And this is a small map of stated satellites and man-made space debris. Flat earthers love to show this because they think that all objects shown are actually as big as the tracking markers in the image. So therefore, there should be this clutter of junk in the air visible every night.
Yep. That's right. Ballin'. You know it. Yep. Yep. You know it. Yep. That's right. Ballin'. You know it.
The research that I performed on this, using an exaggerated size for satellites and an exaggerated quantity for satellites, even if all grouped together into the same spot, would be smaller than the size of the moon when observed from the ground. This slide supposes, because of the temperature of the molecules in the thermosphere, satellites and other man-made objects should just melt. Well, I guess flat earthers have never heard of the dozens of methods of thermal shielding, even right here on Earth. Not to mention the density of the atmosphere at those altitudes is so thin, it's not like they're sitting in a furnace. Plus, here, this is a sparkler. The sparks coming off of this are up to several thousand degrees, and yet, here they are just bouncing off my arm. Get the picture? This slide is claiming that GPS is actually just the LORAN system. And yes, the LORAN system is still in use. But the majority of GPS end devices, which you can buy in the store, don't even recognize the frequencies of LORAN. And the Google Maps claim of using routers and cell phone towers is only when you have that function turned on your mobile device, because it requires two-way communication and is only an option in the software because some mobile devices actually do not have GPS capabilities. Not to mention that most of the GPS receivers that you buy in a store do not offer two-way communication, so therefore communicating with cell phone towers isn't even a thing. This slide is an attempt for flat earthers to sound intelligent by claiming that there's historical experimentation to back their claim. First, it opens with saying that there is no experiment proving the rotation of the Earth. Time for another clip that never gets old.
So we just got accused of taking $25,000 from subscribers through a crowdfunding campaign, spending it on a ring laser gyro, proving that the Earth actually spun, and then we are going to sell back the gyro to eBay to pocket the money and split the $25,000 three ways. Did you notice they forgot to provide any evidence?
So if we can get one of these things, and like I said, they openly acknowledge that ring laser gyros are sensitive enough, absolutely, in fact, they tout it, that they're sensitive enough to detect the rotation of the Earth. I think it'd be really cool if we were able to crowdfund one. If we were unable to do this, I'm going to, get in touch with some people at DIA.
And did you notice that even Lai Sparkane said, no, I did not hear that? Well, it's because it is completely made up. It never happened. Bob on Globebusters a few weeks back spoke about somebody who had bought a $25,000 gyro and then discussed the results.
I'm going to share something with you that we have been working on with our own experiments. So the difference between our fiber optic gyro and these apparatuses basically 100 years ago, when we got our gyro, and by the way, this gyro is an extremely mainstream gyro. It's used by the Defense Department. It cost us around $20,000 for this device, and we have run several tests with it, and I'm going to reveal one of them to you, and others we're going to be revealing at a later time. So what did we detect with our fiber optic gyro when we plugged it in and turned it on? Well, like many other people that registered that use these things, we also detected a roughly 15 degree per hour rotation, okay, or a 1 revolution per day, okay, measurement.
Nor do we have it in our possession to sell it and make money off of it. So talk about a blatant lie, and these guys are allowed to tell it. They're allowed to libel and slander other people with completely false statements.
Then there's Airy's failure, which got its name because it yielded no conclusive results for that which it was intended to conclude, which in this case was light passing through the ether, not confirming the Copernican model. Then there's the Michelson-Morley, which was intended to measure the motion and rotation of the Earth by measuring motion through the ether. Yet, it did not detect anything because it failed to detect the ether itself. So Michelson, Gale, and Pearson went back later and developed a better detection method, now called the Sagnac effect, which showed the difference in light wavelengths when traveling in different directions while moving. This is also the method that is currently used in ring laser gyros. The Troughton-Noble experiment was another attempt to measure motion through the ether, but met the same fate as Michelson-Morley, as it also failed to detect the ether. And apparently there was a Nordermeyer-Buchner experiment, which I only found referenced in a Flat Earther book, claiming to test the Earth's motion by light intensities of celestial bodies. I'm not saying that the experiment didn't take place, I just couldn't find a reference to it. And plus, Earth is not moving fast enough compared to other celestial bodies for that to even really be a thing. And this is a familiar illustration demonstrating the Pythagoras theorem. But wait, at the bottom is a reference to the Bedford level experiment. And not only is their diagram wrong, because he actually should be at the top here, but it says that the Bedford level experiment has been done several times and, quote, remains one of the most widely accepted examples of flat Earth proof. Bring back that quote about science again. Observable. But there are no observations of the results of a successful Bedford level test, even though it claims that skeptics of the test have been soundly disproven by flat earthers. So that means the results can also not be measured. Repeatability, remember that time that the flat earthers went out there to perform a Bedford level test a few years ago? And instead of showing their triumphant footage, they claimed that the dozen or so of cameras that were brought, either their batteries all died or they got no footage, but somehow filmed the cookout later. And falsifiable. It's very easy to demonstrate that refraction, coupled with the curvature of the Earth, can make some objects visible beyond the horizon. So, you can't really call the Bedford level experiment proof of anything. Okay, you guys still with me? Now it's time for the lightning round. Alright, give me 2 minutes on the board. Ready? And go.
Large bodies of water at rest are always level.
Yes, level meaning equidistant from the center of the Earth within that basin.
Earth curvature drop at 8 inches per mile square. Yet we can see land way too far.
And as it gets further away, it disappears from the bottom up, which is consistent with obstruction due to the curvature of the Earth.
Why, at sea level, at 35,000 feet, at 120,000 feet, and still we see no curvature?
The amount of left to right curvature would not be detectable to the human eye at sea level, and barely detectable at 35,000 feet. Eyewitnesses have observed it from 80,000 feet, and balloon footage from 100,000 feet has shown the predicted curvature.
Earth rotation cannot be scientifically detected.
Wrong. A flat earther used a fiber optic gyro and displayed it quite clearly.
Scientists have never proven the existence of gravity and still remains a theory.
Wrong. Gravity is fact. It is observable, measurable, with repeatable experimentation. The only thing that remains theoretical is its generation at the atomic or subatomic level.
How can you prove the distance to the sun, moon, and stars?
Triangulation, parallax, or laser distancing.
Gyroscopes prove planes fly level and do not dip their nose downward to maintain level flight.
The orientation of the nose of an aircraft does not dictate its maintaining of altitude. Gyroscopes need to be calibrated several times throughout the duration of a flight depending on its distance.
The deepest hole ever dug was 7.5 miles. How do you know there is a molten iron core?
Go dig a deeper one. Not relevant to the shape of the Earth.
Fake news. Strong amount of evidence suggests the moon landings were faked.
There has not been one single claim against the moon landings which has not been thoroughly debunked, and again, has nothing to do with the shape of the Earth.
NEC 176-kilometer line of sight microwave link suggests the Earth is flat.
From the peaks of Principe, one would be able to see the top half of the mountains on Sao Tome with the unaided eye. This record-breaking accomplishment was more about the establishment of a solid radio link at that distance and not about overcoming the curvature of the Earth.
Is it possible to have gas pressure without a container?
Of course it's possible. Drive to the top of a hill. The pressure has changed, yet you did not go through a solid container wall.
How can the US Navy railgun shoot at a distance of 100 nautical miles unless the Earth is flat?
The same way any other long-range artillery is fired. Azimuth, elevation angle of the barrel, velocity of the projectile, and compensation for the rotation of the Earth due to flight time. But since this question is actually more about needing to see the target that they're firing at, flat earthers need to be reminded that most artillery is fired without direct line of sight to their target. So, what do we have left? This again. Another claim that all photos of Earth are fake because NASA commissioned a composite similar to Google Earth, and a composite equals fake to flat earthers. Oh wait, a quote from Robert Simon? Quote, "The last time anyone took a photograph from above Earth orbit that showed the entire hemisphere was in 1972 during Apollo 17. Actually, Mr. Simmons said from above low Earth orbit, not Earth orbit. And yes, the last time a human with a camera in hand took a photo of the Earth was during Apollo 17. Let's continue on this quote. Then we wrapped the flat map around a ball. Whoa, 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 whoa. That's not how that quote went. That's not what he said at all. You're deliberately misrepresenting what the man said, and ironically acknowledging the Apollo program at the same time. Here, let me read the exact text from Mr. Simmons. The last time anyone took a photograph from above low Earth orbit that showed the entire hemisphere, one side of the globe, was in 1972 during Apollo 17. NASA's Earth Observation System, or EOS, satellites were designed to give a checkup of Earth's health. By 2002, we finally had enough data to make a snapshot of the entire Earth, so we did. The hard part was creating a flat map of the Earth's surface with 4 months of satellite data. Rito Stockley, now at the Swiss Federal Office of Meteorology and Climatology, did much of this work. We then wrapped the flat map around a ball. My part was integrating the surface and clouds and oceans to match people's expectations of how Earth looks from space. That ball became the famous blue marble. That's how that quote goes. Whole bunch of satellite data that they had to make into a flat map so they can make it a skin on a ball, not took the Apollo 17 photo and wrapped it around a ball. Ironically enough, you acknowledge the photos taken by Apollo 17. You acknowledge the use of satellite photos, and then conclude that the pictures of Earth by satellites and Apollo prove that those photos are fake. Sure, that makes sense. Lest we forget, there are no photos of flat Earth. And now right above it, which Earth is fake? Well, let's see. Composite, enhanced color composite, one of hundreds of daily images from the Discover satellite, and composite with a wide field of view. Still no picture of flat Earth. Interesting. So again, nothing of any scientific flat Earth value here. And I can only repeat what I said in my last video. If there were actual proof of flat Earth, this would not be called the Globe Lie Tour it would be called the Flat Earth Proof Tour. Tell me to do research? Bitch, please. Y'all have a nice day.
Oh my god.